Okay, thank you very much. My pleasure. Thank you, Professor Fenizio. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today so early in the morning. But the weather outside is pretty bad, so it's better to be inside rather than outside. I mean, and the day is going to be bad all along. Now, I guess I'm here because I've been serving as a Brussels correspondent for 16 years. And when I was more or less your age, I was working in a newspaper and I asked to be the correspondent in London. And after 2 months, they sent me to Brussels. That's a sliding door. But I was a little bit upset for not going to London. But then I found out how fantastic is the European Union business and how fantastic it is to be a European editor. And it's much better than London in the end because you have the possibility to live at the core of the activity in terms of production of laws, production of politics, which happens every day in Brussels. And you get the chance to meet all the main characters and all the main actors in person. So it's very much proactive being Brussels because Brussels is not foreign affairs. Brussels is pro quota Italy. Having said that, apparently I did so well that they called me back to Torino 5 years ago. And now, of course, I'm doing the newspaper as the deputy editor-in-chief, which is another kind of business, but still a fantastic business because you can shape the newspaper with our team of journalists. So it's a different way of looking at things, but still entertaining. Now, let's talk about how we communicate the European Union and how the European Union communicates itself. And I will start by telling you a little story. Now, a few years ago, I was in an average working day, as it could be today, and an editor from Turin calls me and asks me to check one piece of information that have been sent out on an internet site. Well, according to this internet source, from the day after the day we were in, there would have been a new European directive whose scope was to forbid people from clapping once the airplanes land in the airport. You know what happens? Sometimes you have a rough takeoff and a rough landing, then you land and then people clap. I don't know why. But
especially in Italy, right?
Especially in Italy. So this was this website that said, from tomorrow on, the European has decided that it is illegal to clap when an airplane lands. Now, that was fully bullshit. And I told the editor, come on, it's crap. And he said, but please, Marco, can you please check anyway? And I said, it's crap. And he said, Marco, check. And so I remember the first rule of the Correspondent, which is it is easier to write the story they ask you to write than to convince your editor that it is bullshit. Nonetheless, I told my editor, yes, okay, I'll check it. And I did hang the phone. After 3 minutes, I called back, said, okay, I called the commission, it's crap. And I said, thank you, Marco, for your cooperation. Now, what's wrong with this? Our editor was doing his job because he saw something on a website and asked his correspondent to verify the information he's been seeing. On the other hand, what we can get out of this is that a very competent and brilliant Italian journalist can believe that the European Union is such a wild institution and a wild congregation of people that can be responsible for banning clapping once an airplane lands. So the problem is, this guy did believe that the European Union could do it, because especially in the Italian public opinion, but we can see overall Europe, it's the same thing. People have a very wide misconception of what the European Union is and what the European Union can do. And so they can believe everything. And this is a kind of weapon that politicians use very often, because they have a very bad, the European Union has a very bad image, and there are reasons for that, which I'll try to explain to you later. And people can believe whatever. So they can believe that they can ban spaghetti con le vongole, clapping in the airplanes, and tomorrow they can ban people from opening windows before 7 o'clock in the morning. Because in the people's mind, they can do whatever. So having said that, I would like to tell you that this comes because we are living in a moment of history in which events have ceased to assert themselves, building one upon the other, one after the other. Today, news and events just jump off your screen, and they can strike, I would say, at the back treacherously in a way. And everything is so confused that in the end, it's very normal to ask yourself, so what really happened today? I mean, did this thing really happen? Was Afghanistan real? Was the landing on the moon real? Is Salvini real? Yes, Salvini is real. The landing of the moon, I don't know, but Salvini is real. So, and there's such a confusion that you ask yourself, did it really happen? And on certain occasions, the outline appears to be so blurred and confused that it's very easy to be deceived. And this has consequences on the way history and news and facts and little and big events influence our lives. And because sometimes we're not completely sure what we have to believe. And there are areas of confusion which bring people to be in an evident loss of contact with the concept of what we believe to be the truth, which is what really happened. So it's never easy to tell the truth, but now it is particularly ambiguous because of all this news storm, information storm, which is fueled by the new medias. Don't get me wrong, I like the new medias very much. I like very much to be with you here today. I would have been more happy to be in person over there, but this year has gone this way. So this confusion is largely attributed to hoax or lies, which are nobly known as fake news. You know, it's a fake news. Which is normally a fake truth because sometimes it is built expressly to give wrong impressions and to give wrong ideas to people. So you got a factory of news and a factory of truths and a factory of hoax and fake news that runs 24 hours a day. And but indeed, it's always been like this from the Troy horse, which was one of the first fake news of history. But it's always been like that. But now everything is amplified by the internet. So we shall be very well aware of this because there's a lot of information which is not what it is supposed to be. So the first thing we can do as citizens, and we as journalists, and you as professors and students, is to try to contain the phenomenon by trying harder to be relevant in your activity of perceiver of information, of subject of information, and sometimes active subject of information. If I take all this long premise to the European field, we see that the European Union is the most obvious possible victim of hoax, of fake news, because it is the most likely scapegoat for what happens in Europe. So if there is, let's take a big country surrounded by the sea with a capital called Rome, which has a very high debt, as we have now. The debt in Italy, I'm sure you know, it's 154% of the GNP, which means that for every euro that of added value, of wealth that you create, you have €1.50 of debt. And then it's not only you, even if you are young guys, it's already your sons and possibly the sons of and daughters of your sons and daughters. So we should reduce this debt, because this debt is something that could hang ourselves the moment of an economic crisis, of financial crisis. But when we do things to cut the debt, it's very hard to find somebody who says we got to cut the debt because we must save your sons and daughters and the sons and daughters of your sons and daughters. You have people saying it is Europe that forces us to do things in order to cut the debt. And when you got to cut the debt, you normally do not do things which are which give pleasure to the citizens, because it's a matter of money. It is a matter of giving less money to the citizen and taking more money to the citizen. But when they say it's been Europe asked us. So it's very comfortable for bad politicians to put the blame on Europe. And Europe is the perfect scapegoat, we said, because Europe is not communicating well, even if Europe has a lot of reasons and a lot of means to be able to give good communication of what it's been doing. Now, I could easily tell you why I love Europe, and not only because my two grandfathers fought in World War I. My father did the resistance and was chased by the Nazi fascists for 8 months, and he is alive. He was alive, because now he's dead. He was alive just by miracle. I was in the army for 1 year, and my son, luckily, will never hold a gun in his life. So from the grandfather who fought against the Austrians and the grandniece who will never hold a gun, the difference is Europe. Because after 1945, the leaders of Europe realized that it's been such a massacre and such a slaughterhouse that they said no more. And slowly they started to build an integration process. And now it's normal for you to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a friend in another country and just travel when the pandemics, before the pandemics or after the pandemics, and go to spend a weekend somewhere else like you were at home. And this is Europe. So Europe is not only an institution, but it is an integration and an aggregation of people that has spared you all from holding a gun, unless you are hunters or whatever you want. But normally it's very likely that if you keep your head in place, you will never kill another man. And no man should kill another man, or no woman should kill another woman. So the difference is Europe. And then there has been an integration which gave us a lot of comfortable chances. When I did my first trip as a traveling correspondent in the 80s, I had to stop at every single border and change money at every single border. And the customer said, "What's this?" "It is a laptop." He says, "What's a laptop?" And they would stop me for hours. And now you just go. And then you have roaming, you have services which are good. So there is a market, there is a feeling, there is an idea, there is a philosophy. So you would think that it's very, very easy for the European Union to communicate this. And in fact, it is not, because there is the habit of the politicians, especially the bad politicians, to communitarize the defeats and nationalize the victories, which means that if in Brussels there's an agreement, it's been your prime minister. And if Brussels there is an agreement, then it's Europe. So after pumping this thing in the last 20 years in Italy and in other countries, the idea that Europe is your bad friend, is your bad neighbor, and your bad boss, it's quite common, and it doesn't help. This is helped in a way by the fact that most politicians, especially populists and sovereignists, do act what we call short-termism. I mean, they think of today and a little bit of tomorrow, and they do not think in the long term and in the long distance as we should do, because gearing politics, it's normally a medium to long term business. So you cannot have results in the day after you've taken the decision. So it's very easy, again, if you want to ride the fears, sometimes very justified, of the voters and of the citizens, it's very easy to put the blame on Europe, and therefore to ride the anger and the justified fears of the voters and get consensus in this way. So they build on bad moods sometimes, and Europe is there to help. Why so? Because the way the European Union communication is organized, it's not the best way to communicate Europe. Now, I'm sure you know everything about the European institutions, but let's sum it up. We have three main European institutions, which are the European Commission, the European Parliament, and the European Council. Now, the European Council is the place where member states are. The European Parliament is the place where the MEPs, the members of the European Parliaments, are, and they are elected directly by us all. So this is, I mean, the only democratic experiment, fully democratic experiment, which is transnational. And so these are the representatives of the people. And then you have the European Commission, which is in a way the institution that writes the drafts of the directives and the European legislations, and then checks that the member states do their job, which means they do respect the engagements they've been taking. Now, one could argue that the communicator for the European Union should be the Council, because it's the Council that holds the fire of the European governments. But this is not the case. One could even argue that the European Parliament should have a bigger role in the communication, because the members of the Parliament are directly elected by the people. And this is not still the case. The communicator of the European Union is the European Commission, which in theory should have no political role, because it is just an executive body in theory. And so it's not in the position to communicate on behalf of member states, because it is made of, theoretically speaking, independent commissioners. But the reality is that if you are in Brussels, every day at noon, you have le briefing du midi, the midday briefing, which is a a press conference in which the Commission tells the press the everyday adventures, the everyday decisions, and takes the answers and tries to give questions. But on many, I would say on the majority of the subjects, the European Commission is not on the measure to answer the questions because most of the questions are political. And the European Commission is not in the measure to do this because they cannot take political attitudes towards the subjects which the press raises in the press room. So what happens is that they normally will not answer your questions. They will give you questions which are just very, very useless. I can tell you a story. When there was Libya, that was the Arab Springs. You remember when Egypt, Tunisia raised, it would have been more or less 10 years ago. We were asking about what the European Union was going to do to face this new movement, which in that moment was considered to be a bringer of good news, a bringer of revolution, bringer of modernizations. And the first day they said, we are closely following the situation, we are closely monitoring the situation, and we'll let you know as we have something to say. And the second day they said, we are closely monitoring the situation, which is interesting, and we are in contact with the local authorities. And the third day, that was the answer. The fourth day, we gave up because it was evident that they were not keen to answer a question they could not answer, because it was up to the member states who hold the foreign policy of the European Union to give an answer, but the member states had different points of view. And therefore the Commission could say, we're closely monitoring the situation today, which was no answer, because if I put you in a headline in La Stampa, the European Union is monitoring the situation, you take the newspaper and you hit me violently, I guess. So, in this situation, the communication that reaches us from Brussels, it's more quantitative than qualitative, because they try to bypass their natural difficulties with a flow of information, which is a way to try to give the impression that they are doing something worthy doing, which in fact it's not always the case. And so once the Commission speaks for everybody and the Council doesn't speak, and the Parliament speaks for itself, but it's still considered not to be the very important institution it is, the European Parliament is a startup in European democracy. But still, they do not ride the scene as they should do. So everything is in the hand of the Commission, and at this point of our meeting, you should know that the Commission is not enough. So every time there is a hoax, there is a fake news, they do not react properly. They normally deny, or they normally stay away from troubles, especially if there is one member state which is part of the action. As we have only recently, the Commission has tried to have to show a louder voice with Poland, with the Central European countries, but still we are far away from what we could do. And the biggest problem is that as a result of the technological change in the way media works and communication flows, what we miss is a true European narrative, which is connected what effectively the European Union gives us. And it is not only propaganda, because propaganda is easy. Comprehension helping, it's difficult. And on the other hand, they do not react to hoax and to fake news as they should do, even when it is very easy. Now, I will give you another story. Professor Fenizio has probably heard this before, but this is my favorite fake news about Europe. And it deals with clams. You know clams? Vongole. It's my favorite. A few years ago, the European Union was forced to decide about the size of the catches of clams in the European seas, which meant deciding which was the minimum size of a clam which could be taken on board by fishermen. I see some of you laughing, but this is necessary if you want to protect the species, because if your catches are too small, there wouldn't be enough clams next year. So you got to be sure that you fish only clams with a normal size. Otherwise, you destroy the species. And next year, there will be no spaghetti con le vongole for everybody. So the European Union stated that the minimum size for the catches was 2.5 centimeters or 25 millimeters. For reasons which are impossible to understand, the fishermen specialized in clams in the Adriatic Sea, which is one of the places where clams are more frequently taken, complained against the European Union and said, because of this size, our activity is broken. Then there was an institutional organization of farmers and fishermen that decided to ride this protest against the European Union. And there was a couple of political parties, sovereignists and populists, who acted against the European Union, which was apparently responsible for destroying the activities of the Adriatic fishermen. And this thing became a very, very big row on the newspapers as well. If you go on Google and Google Unione Europea Vongole, you'll find it all. And so even Il Corriere della Sera ran a story on the front page saying the famous joke that the European Union is preventing us from having spaghetti con le vongole at Christmas. Luckily, and the European Union did nothing at all. And it's a pity, because there was something very easy that could have been done. And it was just checking why the European Union had decided to have a 2.5 centimeters minimum catch. And it was because Italy is the biggest factory of clams. Most of the catches come from Italy and Spain, but Italy is bigger. And then once the European Union has to intervene on that sector, they went to see what was the minimum size in Italy. And there we discovered that the minimum size of Italy had been 2.5 centimeters since a presidential decree, Saragat, 1968. So it meant that from 1968, the minimum catch in Italy was 2.5 centimeters, and that the European Union took the best practice for that. But nonetheless, on the biggest Italian newspaper, there was a title on the front page saying, "We are not going to have spaghetti con le vongole for Christmas," which is the classical example of a short circuit of communication which goes to the European Union, which is responsible for all kind of evil, even preventing you from having clams. It would have been easy, but they didn't do it. I could give you some more examples, but time is running out, and time flies when you're having fun, I guess. So they didn't realize, because maybe they thought that it was a worthy predicament, the one not that you should never feed the troll. So if somebody attacks you, you better leave him go. Which most of the times is true, but sometimes you should know you should not do it, especially when you have the responsibility of talking on behalf of 500 million people. So the lack of counteraction to fake news, the real counteraction, the lack of a real European narrative, something modern, something that could drive you all into this European business, which is what has been saving our life for the past 70 years. And the lack of political authority in stating one fact has been the problem which caused the European Union not to be in our hearts. So when you see that there was, now things have probably changed, but just before Draghi, there was more than a half of the Italians that said that the European Union had got their lives worse than before the European Union. There was this, the majority of Italians that thought that European Union was bad to the European citizens. Now, I think that everybody can disagree with everything, but thinking that the European Union has destroyed our life, it's something that it's to say a little, it's a misconception. So what we should do, we should tell them to tell the truth, to have a narrative, to try to counteract fake news. The more they can get, the more they can do. We should tell them to avoid quantity and put on quality. But my impression is that in the last few years, things have gone worse. And pandemics have made things even a little bit more difficult, because you tend to know things better when you're moving around, but once you're on the screen, you are tempted by all those websites which tell you things as they are not completely are. What is, sometimes you can ask yourself if the European Union really wants to communicate. And sometimes I think that there is not a fulfilled will and disposition to communicate. Because once you communicate, you will have to tell more or less, you will have to give the people the means to understand how to tell right from wrong, good from bad, saint from evil. And sometimes I'm not completely sure that this is the will of the European communicators. But this is the point, and there's a lot that shall be done. Talking about journalists which are responsible in this, I could say that with all this technology, which I like, I understand, I underline it again, technology has made life more difficult for journalists, even if we think that it could be vice versa. Because there's a new generation of people who think that you have everything at hand, and that it is enough to be beside your screen, to be aware, to be well informed, to get the news. Yes, this is part of the story, but still journalists have to walk on pavements, meet people, go to places, smell the places, hear the words, and there's still a whole world around. But this is not what happens anymore, or it doesn't happen as much as it was happening once, mainly for two reasons. First, as I was saying, because my younger colleagues think that they can do everything on the phone or beside the screen. Second of all, because the whole media system is been going through such a very bad crisis that they are very badly paid. The newspapers have less means than they had in the past. And so they have, it's harder for a young journalist to get the same passion and the same strength that is needed to do good journalism. They, I don't know how to say in English, giocano per lo 0-0. They play to draw, as we would say in a football match, because circumstances are tough. Money is very low. I am ashamed of how little we pay some of our collaborators, but it's not me deciding how much they get paid. But still, there is a whole world that has prevented most of the younger colleagues to have the flame that is needed for journalism. And this is very comfortable for the institutions, because the number of investigative journalists, the number of nerds who want to check everything, who want to see everything, is decreasing every year. The number, so this is comfortable for politicians that can say whatever and not be counteracted, and institutions that if they do not do their jobs, they can easily keep on going without problems. So I tell you all this because there is a role that each of us, independently from his age, should do. And it is caring about quality more than quantity in what we ask and in what we offer. And sometimes be in a position to beware from quantity, because quantity sometimes it's given you to hide the lack of quality. You need to be tough and well informed if you want to see whether an institution is telling you the truth, because you have a responsibility towards yourself, towards your friends, and if you are a communicator, towards your readers, to be able to detect the concrete events, the concrete facts behind the declaration of the European Commission or the European Parliament or the Council. You know that we should say that the medium is the message. And so the mediums we have now in Brussels are the message. And it is necessary, is absolutely necessary, it's absolutely, it is something that we have to do now, is to try to push them and ask for more information, ask La Stampa, ask myself to give you more quality and less quantity, ask everybody to give you more quality and less quantity, and ask your political leaders to be truth. And you got to push everybody and beware of quantity. I believe that I still believe you can change the world. We can change the world a little. And if you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for me, because I still believe in it. And to sum it all up, because it's 40 minutes now, what I will tell you is basically, if I will have to do the front page story, is that European Union is communicating a lot. It's not communicating the way it should, and it could communicate better if it had the guts to do it, but they haven't got it. And there is a wide misconception of what European Union can do. And national and local politicians do take advantage of these misconceptions. There are lazy readers which do not want to be well informed. They do not choose. So if I tell you that you cannot clap, you do not think, come on, it's crap. and there is a whole system of, of events, sometimes very hard. Some of them are very hard to be corrected, that we should try little by little to correct. So since, as we like to say, the European Union, it's not something outside our door, but the European Union, it's us, it's you. It's us that have the responsibility little by little to change this thing. And if we keep on asking, if we keep on pushing them, if we keep off nicely and gently stalking the European institution, stalking the professors, stalking the journalists, then we can take a better advantage of that fantastic thing that we call European Union. Now, again, if you do it for myself, if you don't want to do for yourself, I hope you got something in this 42 minutes. And for the next, I'm ready to take a coffee. No, I'm ready to take your answers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zatterin. Thank you very much. Of course, now you have the chance to put your questions and comments on the chat, for example, or you can take the mic as usual. And so, as an icebreaker, I would start with a question from myself. Because you talked about the conditions of journalists in Italy, but in other countries as well. But what about the Brussels correspondents for the most important newspapers and so on? That is, according to your experience, how are they chosen? How are they appointed by their newspapers? Because in order to, as you said, in order to inform about the European Union and so on, you have to be well prepared about the European Union, which is nothing easy, of course. And I don't want to name anybody, but we know very well that some correspondents, are not well prepared. And so what is the process, the appointment process of these people, according to your experience, and what are the main features, the main qualities correspondents should have to, to do a good job in Brussels and for European and national citizens?
As I consider, thank you for that. I mean, as I consider myself a European journalist, I will refrain from talking about other newspapers. But I can tell you the two experiences I have, which is my designation, which was in year, the second time was, I mean, the first time I told you, I asked to go to London and they sent me to Brussels, which was fun. And the second time in 2006, our correspondent in Brussels retired because of age. And I went to the editor and says, I would like to go to London. No, I asked to go to Brussels again. I want to go to Brussels. And I was the head of the economic and financial desk. And I had been already a foreign correspondent for 6 years. I spoke English, I spoke French. And I said, I would like to go. And he said, no, you're not going because I need you here, which is typical of newspapers. I mean, you're doing a good job here. I want you here. And I told him I can do a better job there. And then, I mean, I've already got one foot in the grave. If I don't go now, I will never go. And in the end, I convinced him. So that was my appointment procedure. I asked it and he said yes. In 2016, when I came back to Brussels, I was active part in the selection of our new correspondent in Brussels. And the main editor and I had lunch the day I arrived, because my substitute had to be there soon. And there were 3 colleagues who had been proposing themselves to go to Brussels. And I said, I don't want them. You are the editor, you choose, but I don't want them. Because they haven't got the right spirit, they haven't got the right skills, they haven't got the right 360 degrees vision that is needed by a correspondent. And so we did choose a 4th name, which I proposed, which is our actual correspondent, Marco Bresolin, who's the best European correspondent in Brussels now. And Marco was rather young in those days, because he would have been, let's say, 34, which is, for a journalist, it's young. I know you think that he's got 1 foot in the grave, but 34 for journalists is young. And I have been working with him in a few occasions. He came to do the European elections in Brussels and Strasbourg in 2014. And then between these days, I mean, mid-November 2015 and spring 2016, we were sucked in by the wave of terroristic attacks. There was the Bataclan on 13th of November 2015, and there was Brussels on the 16th of March 2016, and we were there. And the story went so big that they asked me, do you need help? And I said, yes, a 2nd person will be fine. And I asked for Marco. And Marco came, and Marco was working at the foreign desk. And Marco worked fantastically. He had guts, he had passion. He was always 1 step beyond. And in Brussels, when the attacks came to our city, and it was a hell for 1 week, and we lost a lot of lives, and there was terror in the city, Marco did a fantastic job. So in July 2016, I said, I want Marco. And the editor said, yes, of course, you're in charge, we take Marco. So that was the appointment procedure for our correspondent, which I still think is the best correspondent in Brussels. And of course, I'm not going to tell you about the others, but I tell you as I would do and as we did at La Stampa. And the skills, sorry. The skills, curiosity, passion, quality, interest, large vision. We are living in a moment in which people ask you to be narrow-minded, to be specialized. And it's easy to be specialized, but specialization is good if you are doing surgical operations or you are intervening on the brain. But if you are a communicator, you should be joining the dots, and you should be able to look 360 degrees and not only be focalized on your single subject. I've seen journalists who only do the Democratic Party. And if you ask them to write a story about another party, it says, no, I'm only covering the Democratic Party, which is stupid. You should do politics. Maybe you should have a subject that you like more than the others, but then it's 360 degrees. So you need courage. You must work a lot, meet people, work on relations, and have passion, and have curiosity, and love quality. And Marco is doing all this.
So thank you very much. There is a question from Vasily, I think from Moscow, I guess. So Vasily, I don't know whether you like to switch on your mic and to put the question directly, or do you want me to do it?
Actually, I will ask the question with great pleasure, if you don't mind. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank our dear lecturer for the presentation. It was quite informative and thought-provoking, right? So my question is the following. Truthful and unbiased reporting could in some way exacerbate the existing tensions, bringing some delicate issues back on the agenda. For example, the aging of population, migration crisis, the rich versus the poor regions, countries, clashes, cleavage, etc. Do you believe that in this sense, objective reporting would make our life a happier one? Since I do believe that the ultimate goal of journalism is to make our life here better. Thank you.
Thank you, Vasily. The answer is yes. It is not important what I think, but it is important what I must do. When I write a story, the idea of how happy I can make you it's not in the front row. If I have to tell a story, if I have to tell what happened, my first concern is try to be as truthful as possible to what I've seen and what I have studied. And consequences are not my first idea. So if I discover that somebody has done something, or if there is in the migrant crisis an event which is relevant for the newspaper, my only concern should be to try to tell it as truthfully as I can understand it, because of course I cannot pretend to be perfect in my analysis. I can try to be as neat, as truthful as I can be, but maybe I haven't seen something or something skipped from my attention. But the answer is yes, you should tell the truth. And moreover, you should try to, and again, it's not easy to tell the truth. Don't take me as a dogmatic. Truth, it's a very complicated business. But try to be influenced only by your attitude, only by your own profession. Therefore, not being influenced by politicians, medias, stakeholders, whatever. And try, and that's important, to put the news you're writing in the context. So if tomorrow you have 2,000 people landing in Genoa, let's say, for the day, it's an invasion. But if it is the first time that people land in Genoa, maybe it's just a coincidence. So you should say 2,000 people landed in Genoa. It is the first time ever. It happened because of this. And this happens in the framework of that. This is what we have to do. And the fact that this gives you pleasure or less pleasure, it's not my business. So if your football team loses, I'm not going to tell you, yes, but they played well. They lost. Because I'm sure that most of the readers are more intelligent and better than what we think. And the readers can be helped by providing them information which is real and which is well explained. My business is try to put the news in the framework in which they're happening. If it is bad for you, I'm sorry, of course. And having said that, by respecting the rules, because private lives must be respected, if the fact is not of a general competence, grief must be respected. Personal lives must be respected, unless they become of general interest. And I hope it helps you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zatterin and Mr. Vasily.
Can I do a question to Marco?
Inella, from a colleague.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Thank you for explanation, Marco. And I agree with you about the difficulty to communicate in Europe. And you underlined that the role of European Commission is not is an institutional role of communication and is not able to create it to generate it a good sentiment about Europe. But I know that European institution give the opportunity for the journalism to improve their competences. You worked in Brussels, you well know the situation or the resource that the European institution give to the European journalists. But usually these opportunities are not used by the journalism that remain self-referential and not able to go beyond a national vision of the situation. And this is a bias because it's not easy to understand European affair in a situation in which national journalism is too self-referential. It's not national referential, but self-referential. It's not able to build another kind of narrative about Europe. And these increase the gap that you well described. Do you think that the responsibility of journalism, of newspaper, is also the responsibility not open on change the perspective in which to view the European processes?
Thank you,
Yes.
Marinella.
Yes, I am guilty. No, well, I mean, you act in the community you act. I mean, I could tell you that I should go into details, but I have a few relevant colleagues at La Stampa, with which I have to deal every day, but this happens in all newspapers, which are totally Eurosceptics, because they have been merging in the narrative before. You remember we had a prime minister that now wants to be president of the Italian Republic, in which case I will go to the Foreign Affairs Ministry, I will give my passport back and ask to be a citizen of the world, and I will give up my Italian nationality, which from the day after the arrival of the euro started making counts in vecchie lire, in old liras, which was a completely wrong way of doing, because we had a new currency and the currency would have been forever. You should have been talking about the new currency. It's just like you have a new girlfriend or new boyfriend and you keep on talking about my old girlfriend. So my old girlfriend used to do this, my old boyfriend used to do this, which doesn't work normally in couples unless you have particular desires. Yes, this is true. There is a large part of now, I will say this. I've seen few categories of people which are more conservative than Italian journalists. But that was off the record. Most of our colleagues do not believe in the European affairs. Most of the people we sell the papers to do not believe in the European affairs. So believe me, whenever there is something from the European Union which is relevant, but not source of contradiction, not source of fight, verbal fight, political fight, it is very, very difficult to break the against Europe feeling that there is in the desk, because the European affair, the foreign affairs desk in my newspaper doesn't like Europe and thinks Europe is crap. So when it comes with the list of news for the day, Europe is at the bottom of it. So I take all my power and put it back. But once you're doing the newspaper, then you got to fight to put Europe in the newspaper, because being an editor is not dictatorship. A newspaper is a collective business. It's a sort of, it comes out of democracy. So it is true, we should have done Europe in a better way. We at La Stampa, we are trying to do it, and I think that sometimes we even succeed. But generally speaking, you're right. The European Union is not done very well in most of the newspapers. Normally it's done against the European Union. And when you say that the European Union gives you means to have a better penetration of the European communication system, I say it's not working for 3 reasons. First of all, because correspondents are always very busy. And it would be very, very difficult for an average correspondent to take a day off or a half a day off to do something that we will not use for the newspaper. Second of all, because it is quantity. It's dossiers, it's videos, it's whatever, but they are not going straight to the core. And third of all, because we need news. Our dogma is news. We got to do titles that sound like something new. And so this is, and I forgot to tell you this before, when you do a correspondent, you should look for news, things people do not know, things which are of general interest. And it's difficult to deal with European Union. Interests are different. They are doing more propaganda than journalism on the record. Then in the corridors, everything happens. And that's the fun of being a correspondent, find somebody or in a corridor tell you what to do. But having said that, I think, yes, there is a responsibility. There is a responsibility of newspapers, because they read the European affairs as most of the Italians. I mean, newspapers are Italians, and the journalists are Italian. And they live in this communication world in which the European Union is bad since the days of La Vecchia Lira, the old lira. So everything is complicated, but at least I think we at La Stampa, we are trying to break this world, and I think even Repubblica is doing this a little bit. Corriere della Sera, it's more institutional. It's more institutional, but we at La Stampa, we are trying to do it every day.
Okay, thank you both. Thank you both. There is a question from Alexandru. Alexandru, can you take the mic and read your question if you like? Otherwise, I will do it for you.
Yes, of course. Just a second.
And where are you from?
Yes, I'm from Moldova, but I'm studying in Moscow State University of International Relations. Good morning one more time. Thank you for your lecture. It was really interesting from my point of view. And I would like to ask you a question. Is it possible to avoid fake news if you are not an expert in some spheres, in some fields? For example, you cannot be an expert in every region. For example, you understand the real situation in Europe, but you are not an expert in Asia or in the African region. How we can avoid this fake news? How can we analyze them?
Grazie, Alexandro. Thank you very much for your question. One of the rules of journalism is always double check. Now, you cannot double check all the news that you read, but there is something, if there is something relevant, if there is something that really concerns you, always double check with a different source. Now, if I would, let's say, if I have an official news from Moscow, I will try to double check it with a source from Washington, or from Brussels, or from Paris, or from London. And you will find out that the way the things are told, will be quite difficult, quite different. So if I have Mr. Putin saying the sky is blue, which is very likely to be true, and if I really want to know if it is true what Mr. Putin is saying, I will go and check. I would like to read the New York Times or another media who's telling the same stories and see whether the sky is blue or not. And if I am in Moscow, I can just raise my head and see whether the sky is blue. But if I'm not in Moscow, I will have to check an independent source. And sometimes it's very difficult because most of the internet tries to multiply the sources. So make this experiment if you haven't done this before. Just Google something which is not very common, and you will see that you got 50, 60, 100. I mean, many possible websites to check, but you will find that most of them have the same information. You've probably tested this before. I mean, if you want to know who Giovanni Belzoni is, just to mention one, you will find that most of the sites give you the same information with the same words, because internet is providing you with quantity, as I told you before. And then you will find a couple of independent and more relevant sources that you will have to check. Now, if you're interested and if you want to know, first of all, do not believe whatever they told you, not even what I tell you now. And if you're interested and you think that what I'm telling you is relevant and it needs to be checked because I might be lying to you, go and do it. Sometimes say that we're not living in a democracy, but internet can be misleading, but we never had so much democracy now, because if you live in a place in which the providers are not close, so you're not living in China, you can check things. Now, if I tell you that Marco Bresolin was the Brussels correspondent from La Stampa from July 2016, you can say, okay, he's not lying. But then you can go and check, and you will find that Marco Bresolin wrote this first story from Brussels in July 2016, therefore I'm not lying. If there is something which is relevant for you and you must double check it. And sometimes when it's too big, don't believe it. When they tell you, I'm sure AS Roma is going to win the league this year, don't believe it. It will not happen. And if I tell you that AS Roma will win the league this year, you got to be doubtful. Even if I am a nice guy and maybe I'm convincing, but I will tell you, it will not happen. You can check it, go and see the score. So always double check it and do not believe on what you see. This is you can win. You can win.
Okay, thank you very much. There is a question from Matilde. Matilde, would you like to take the mic or not?
Yes.
Okay, so where are you from, Matilde? Oh, you are in presence. So just a second. Just a second. Okay, please go.
So I'm from France, and it's just a little question about the previous question about fake news. You told that we have to check information by ourselves, but can we also only trust the official institution, because they are not private institutions, they are public institutions, and so I believe that they follow general interests. I don't know.
Merci Matilde, ça c'est une bonne question. Allora, no, you should never trust anybody. No, I mean, don't even trust myself. And I tell you why, because there was, I give you a light story. A few years ago, there was a German European commissioner who was caught on a beach on the Baltic Sea, walking hand in hand with his chef de cabinet, with the head of the cabinet, and they were both naked. And of course, she wasn't his wife, and he had a wife. And the picture appeared in the newspaper. I mean, this is a very silly story, but just to tell you what was the reaction. So there was this picture of these two guys walking hand in hand, naked on a beach. And they were not officially related. They both have other people in their lives, which is, I mean, it's their business. I don't care. But since they were both European civil servants, the question was raised at the briefing du midi, the midday briefing, at the 12 o'clock conference in Brussels. And the European Commission was very embarrassed, and rightly so, answered that it was un incontro di lavoro. I mean, it was a professional meeting, which, of course, it was pretty hard to believe. But they decided to keep this line. I mean, they were in a working meeting. Of course, it was not, especially after we found out that 1 week later, the wife has left the commissioner. So, but on the record, on the European records, you will have the commission saying that it was a working meeting between the two guys. And they kept the line, even in the corridors, because I remember asking the spokesman, come on, how can you do that? I mean, it's obvious. It's their business. I'm not judging them, but... And he said, no. It was a working meeting. This is silly, I know. It's nothing to do with destinies of the world, but this is to mean that on that occasion, the Commission took the official line, the official lie, and they kept on. Because if there has been a meeting between Draghi and Macron, and they two has been quarreling a lot, the European Commission will never say, yes, Draghi said, you're such a crap, you're such a twat. And Macron said, you are c'est un émerteur, salut. They will never do this. They will say, it's been a frank and constructive meeting in which the two leaders discussed the issues of the day. So do not trust the institutions, do not trust me. Take the information they give you and check it, and moreover, try to understand them while putting them in the right context.
Thank you very much. There is a question from Max August. Where are you? Are you here or are you connected?
No, I'm connected.
Connected. So where are you? And
where I'm from, maybe? No.
Yeah. Where are you from and where are
I'm
you?
from
If you're
France,
connected, yes.
France. So I thank you for this interesting intervention. I'm reminding of a message that appeared on the wall page of the Figaro many weeks ago, more or less called for Europe, but which was actually an anti-European wish list from Viktor Orban. You have already proposed some ideas of response, but should the newspaper have contextualized this message or even rejected it? Or it is its role to publish all opinions and pass on foreign ones, even if they have purely subjective and political purpose, like this one?
Yes, thank you, Max. Merci. I think you should publish everything which is constitutional. And I don't particularly like Viktor Orban, even if he's a very nice chap. I had the chance to meet him a couple of times. I had dinner with Orban, and it's more fun. It's funnier than most of my friends, but politically is a disaster. But on the other hand, it's been democratically elected. He's the prime minister in Hungary because people did vote him. Then, how did it happen? We know it's not completely clear. So, if there is a debate, you should publish or constitutionally relevant intervention. I mean, by saying constitutionally relevant, I mean people who are not breaching the law. And it's a contribution, and he's a prime minister of a European member state. And even if I think he's a twat, I will publish his article on the Stampa. When there was this huge debate about yes, green pass, no green pass, vaccination or not vaccination, we did an editorial saying that we are in favor of the green pass and we are in favor of vaccination. But we published more than one intervention of people saying why I am not in favor of green passes, why I'm not in favor of vaccination. And there is a very relevant contributor to La Stampa, which is called Massimo Cacciari. You find him today on La Stampa as well. And Cacciari is against the green pass. And he's someone we really think it's important for our newspaper because he's a philosopher, he's a very bright mind. But he is against green pass. So what we did was publishing his article against the green pass, remembering that the newspaper is in favor. Now, it is true that we have to publish news only, but it is also true that news can be divided from comments. And a newspaper has to take a side sometimes, cannot always be independently take a side. Now, we decided that with all doubts and all complications, green passes was the way that we could have been safer, and we declared we thought so. And then I could tell you that if I had to choose, I would have avoided vaccine. But then I decided that was the safest possible thing to try to save myself and the people I live with. But again, we published more than one intervention, more than one articles of people saying the contrary of what we think, because then people will decide. You got to give the readers the means to make their own mind. So we will tell you why we think it's good, and then there will be somebody say why we think it's bad. And the reader will choose with his own means, and we think that's journalism.
Thank you very much. And there is a question from Alexis.
Abbiamo una domanda di un italiano poi.
Sì, yes, there is one.
Italians are shy.
They are shy, but there is one. So Alexis first. Alexis, where are you from? And please, can you take the mic?
Hello, I am French, and actually I'm outside of Torino for today. So my question was, isn't the whole debate about fake news and how government needs to act just a very big convenience for governments to avoid accountability and say that all their just to judge annoying questions? And that's also true for the European Union, because they will, every time they find themselves being unpopular, they can just say, well, it's because there's a bunch of fake news on us. It's very true for the EU in particular, who doesn't attract many votes in Eastern Europe and even in the West. And when we look at the polls of opinions of common people, even the people who say support the EU actually know very little about that. So what do you think about that? Isn't it very convenient, this meeting?
Well, it could be convenient, Alexis, but as we told before, there is not an active action from the European Union to counteract against fake news. What it is important is that being pro-European doesn't mean that you accept what the European Union says as a dogma. Take La Stampa of last week. We said that the meetings about migrations and the meetings about energy prices was a failure. So I don't think that Europe needs fake news as an alibi. Fake news should be broken by members of the press and by readers, even before the European institution. But then you are right, because European Union sometimes is very unpopular because people is not aware of what it means, of the procedures, of the way things have got better, sometimes worse, with the European Union. We should criticize the European Union in order to make it better. But I don't think fake news are an alibi. Fake news are a disease that, especially in the most weak readers, those who are not here as you are studying at a university, can generate a negative, a more than necessary negative attitude towards the European Union. And fake news is just a part of this, and disinformation misinformation is another one, and lack of knowledge is another one. And I would put European institutions as a subject for lower schools, schools, in a critical way, but try to make people aware that we are part of a community in respecting our own traditions. Because when people say that the European Union is breaching our traditions, that they want to customize ourselves, first of all, I will tell you that that Facebook wants to customize you more than the European Union, but you're probably on Facebook. And then that the European Union is something that we are building, and it's the image of our work. Therefore, I don't think that fake news are an alibi, especially because all good newspapers, from Figaro to La Stampa to Guardian to Corriere della Sera, they get always the chance to criticize Europe when they think that Europe is misbehaving. So someone could take it as an alibi, but I don't think it works, because the problems go far beyond fake news. But your point is sensible.
Okay, thank you both. And Angela, it's your turn. Angela is already on the screen. Please go.
Good morning to everyone. Thank you, Mr. Zatterin, for your interesting lecture. My question is about how young people can participate in this communication process. We know today that young people are not informed about what happened in our society and in Europe. And I say there is a sort of ignorance about this issue. Do you think young people are not able to read and understand informations, or they don't want to do it, or mass media are not able to communicate in the better way with young people?
The all of this together and none of this. I would never dare to say that young people are not able to communicate, especially once you see what is happening, for example, with Friday for Future. Young people can be the best communicators. We have now, I have a girl of 17, 18, how old is Greta, which is leading in a way, the world, trying to foster the awareness of the climate change and the risks of climate change. So I think it can be done. But of course, you got to be creative. And of course, it's not difficult. And of course, you got to fight. And that's why I always repeat and I always use the word passion, because passion is the fire of your profession. Passion is the fuel of your skills. So if you do something in which you believe with passion and you believe in it, you will find a way. And there is an old song that says, love will find a way. And I think that also information will find a way. And you got a lot of means. You got the internet, you got forums, there's plenty of meeting. You can participate to things, you can raise questions. You've got occasions like this one organized by our friends, the professors. We should, in our little lives or bigger lives, raise questions and raise attitude and I've lost you, sorry. Here you are. And download and share your capacities. And you can do it. You can open a blog, you can write stories for La Stampa, you can go to forums, you can participate, and you can do Friday for Europe, or do Thursday, because Fridays are already taken. Do Thursday for Europe or Saturday morning for Europe. But my impression, you can do it, anyone can do it. But I have the impression that these are times of laziness because of the pandemics, because of the waves of the former crisis, because of the difficulty of the moment. And I understand that young people are a little bit worried about the future, and rightly so. So sometimes people do have, these young people do have the feeling that it's better to surrender, and which is something that I cannot accept personally, but I understand why it is happening. So what I will tell you is just do it, find a way. And as somebody asked me, how can I join the newspaper? And I would say, we hire people, we hire less people than in the past, but those who really fight for this make it. So, so Angela, if you believe it, you'll find a way. And it's not me, the person that will tell you how to do it. It's yourself that you'll find a way. And I'm not escaping your question. Simply, it's not my role to give you an answer. And if I give you a straight answer, that would be fake news.